Alright, we are back with news that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth has officially been revealed for the Switch 2 and Xbox, and it's arriving much sooner than we all thought. We'll also be taking a look at some old school concept art for an early version of Final Fantasy VII from none other than Tetsuya Nomura, and we'll be recapping part 2 of the Dirge of Cerberus event in Ever Crisis. So if you're excited, if any of this sounds cool to you, you can click the like button and subscribe, and if you're hyped for Final Fantasy, I wouldn't mind if you hyped up the video. So let's talk about it. Alright, so it was officially revealed at this morning's Nintendo Direct that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is officially coming to the Switch 2 and the Xbox on June 3rd of this year, which is insanely quick. That's some really fast turnaround time to port a game, especially the size of Rebirth and all of the weird tech stuff it's doing, to a Switch 2 and an Xbox. That's incredibly impressive. Now, focusing specifically on the Switch 2 version of the game, looking at its trailer, it does have that weird anti-aliasing going on with the hair, which is something that 7 Remake also dealt with on the Switch 2. Although I think some people were saying that the handheld mode didn't suffer from that. People will have to clarify in the comments. But either way, I think people will take some weird stuff going on with the hair if it means that they can play a game like Rebirth on a Switch 2 and actually have it run. Like, granted, it's a trailer, they can pick all the best pieces they want to show off, but it looks to be running at a stable 30 frames per second, and it looks really good. Now, granted, there are less NPCs in some of the areas, which is just a byproduct of being on the Switch 2. It's a powerful machine, but obviously nowhere near the level of a PS5 or an Xbox console, but reducing NPCs, that's to be expected. But of course, when it comes to the technical aspects of Rebirth on the Switch 2, we'll have to wait for people to get hands-on previews with the game on docked mode and in handheld mode. So people like Digital Foundry will have to pull out all of their insane technical prowess and tools to really comb through with a fine-tooth comb to see how the Switch 2 version of this game is running. But based on the trailer, it's incredibly impressive. A lot of us were curious, like, how do you get a game the size of Rebirth, the scope of Rebirth, with the technical requirements to run on what is essentially a cell phone with an extra battery pack? This is pretty cool. Now, one little thing I did notice is in the trailer, and I'm going to try my best to avoid spoilers. There might be some new people here who are jumping on board with the Remake trilogy, and 7 Remake was their first, but there's a shot of Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett in a specific battle that we all know of. And they changed the background. It's all blacked out now with some purple energy in the back. And I don't think that's a big story thing. I think it might just be them trying to prevent spoilers, even though that specific scene has been shared countless times online on social media. I just thought that was kind of funny, but it's probably just them trying to avoid some spoilery stuff in certain areas. Now, they do mention in the trailer that there will be boost functions. Funny enough, they didn't refer to it as streamlined progression, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. We see Cloud doing maximum damage. We see everyone in the party with their full limit breaks. So I'm assuming all of the streamlined stuff we just recently got with the Switch 2 and Xbox versions of Remake, as well as them adding it to PS5 and PC, will be made available for Rebirth. So again, people can jump on board, have some fun. Those with accessibility needs can also play the game, hopefully without any issue. This is pretty cool. And considering the fact that a lot of people have seemingly jumped on board with this trilogy with the release of 7 Remake on the Switch 2, the more people that get to play Rebirth, the better. And that's what gaming is about. Jumping on, having fun, absorbing the story, just having a good time. I also can't help but wonder, like, what are new fans feeling? For so many of us, we had a pretty long downtime in between Remake and Rebirth, and now there are people who are just playing Remake and just finishing it, and now getting the trailer for Rebirth and finding out that in 4 months, this game is going to be playable for them. The trailer is so well done. The hype that they're building up is really cool. And I can't imagine how exciting it must be for these new players who are like, whoa, I'm getting all this in like one foul swoop, and then part 3 is most likely going to be early next year. It's an insane blitzkrieg of marketing going on. And speaking of marketing, the official trailer they released for Rebirth on the multi-platform side is really, really good. It It tells you everything you need to know about the story. It shows off cool combat scenarios, doesn't spoil anything. It feels very much like a trailer that they would have made to promote 7 Remake, which I think the marketing on 7 Remake was stellar, especially compared to Rebirth. They also used the track, I believe it's called Duel of the Divine, to score this trailer, and it's the song that plays when you fight the summons in Rebirth. It's a really great track, and I found out last year that that track was actually arranged by one of the composers who worked on Final Fantasy XVI. Not Soken himself, somebody else, I forget the name, apologies to that composer, but they arranged that track, and when you listen to it, it's like, oh yeah, I definitely get some Final Fantasy XVI vibes from this track. Really great song, really incredible trailer. It makes me pumped to play Rebirth all over again, and I'm still going through my hard mode playthrough. Now, as far as pricing goes, it looks like the Switch 2 version of the game will be $49.99, which is the standard price for Rebirth on the PlayStation 5 when it's not on sale. But according to some users on Twitter, it looks like the Xbox version has a slight discount for a limited time, so you'll be able to pre-order it for $39.99. But to sweeten the deal for Switch 2 users, if you get the physical edition of Rebirth, not only do you get all the bonus DLC and equipable items, but you also get this really beautiful reversible inlay cover art, which features that really cool poster of the characters of 7. They're using this specific artwork for the Rebirth Plus soundtrack as well. And then on the other side has that really beautiful key art of the entire party just staring off into the distance, the unknown journey that is currently awaiting them. But to make things even better, the first run of Switch 2 copies of Rebirth will feature a limited in-box bonus item, and that's a Magic the Gathering card featuring Zack. And it's not just any old card. This is a card that has artwork from Tetsuya Nomura himself. Now, they've also used this image on some of the Ultimanias that have come out. It's a really great piece. So if you're someone who loves the Magic series and you're collecting the cards, this will probably be a version you'll want to get. This is a pretty rare card and you're guaranteed to get it. Now, to go along with that announcement, we have some words from Naoki Hamaguchi in regards to the future of the remake trilogy. He goes on to say, "We've announced that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will launch on June 3rd. With the addition of Switch 2 and Xbox, the game will be released as a full multi-platform title. This year, we plan to share more updates on the 7 Remake project than ever before. We look forward to celebrating together with even more players around the world." He also makes mention that they've learned a lot developing the game on the Steam Deck, and that's what helped improve the Switch 2 version of Rebirth specifically. And that was in response to the Twitter account Stealth40k that was reporting that Rebirth on the Switch 2 is going to be 102 gigabytes. And I believe 7 Remake was around 90. So that's some pretty impressive compression. Still a very large game, but considering that Rebirth is a technical marvel, again, it's running on Unreal Engine 4, and that engine is not meant to do these types of games, but the fact that it works is pretty nuts. But in terms of 7 Remake in Part 3, everything seems to be lining up. They've announced Rebirth officially for multi-platform. It releases on June 3rd, and just a couple days after that is Summer Game Fest. So they have a lot of momentum right now and a lot of new people who are jumping on board with the Remake trilogy. And what's really cool is that now I feel like more than ever, so many more people are going to be anticipating the finale, Part 3. We're all in this together. What's that High School Musical? Is that the name of the Disney movie? We're all in this together. I never watched it. That was past like when I was interested in like Disney stuff. But either way, this is really cool. And again, like the marketing just seems like it's in high gear now. They're excited. Square Enix very much is taking the multi-platform approach seriously, and it's all lining up to just have a united front, all waiting for Part 3. And again, as you know, the months progress, I'm sure we'll get more information on the Switch 2 version of Rebirth in particular, more hands-on stuff, more articles, really kind of breaking down the technical aspects, the nitty-gritty of what they're doing with Rebirth. Now, very quickly, They did show off a new trailer for Resident Evil Requiem, which is officially coming to the Switch 2 now. The RE engine is something incredible. They can now get games like Requiem running on a Switch 2. And granted, there are some downgrades with some of the imaging that we're seeing, but like, people just want to play these games. I think that's what people care about most. And they covered a lot of stuff in the trailer that I've already covered here on the channel, but we did see some new footage of Leon specifically using a rifle with the scope. He's also in a seemingly dilapidated, broken down environment that is set on fire. So there wasn't really new in the way of new footage for Requiem, but they do plan to do a Nintendo creator's voice with the game's director. So I'll be checking that out whenever that hits. That should be pretty exciting. Now up next, I'm gonna take you back to the past with some really cool old school early concept art from Tetsuya Nomura that was brought out to help celebrate the 29th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII. Yes, I said 29th, next year is 30, and boy am I starting to feel it in my lower back. It's a bit of a problem. Now, what's cool about this artwork is that it has been shared before, but now Tetsuya Nomura has added his own commentary to explain what exactly they were cooking up in the very early stages of Final Fantasy VII's development. And what's super cool is we have a lot of really big points of interest in this artwork. We start off at the very bottom. We see an early iteration of Cloud getting ready to face off with a two-headed dragon, which looks pretty terrifying. Now there's also a bridge. Now on that bridge was a character by the name of Johnny the Needle. This Johnny has no relation to the Johnny that would make it into FF7, and Nomura says that this guy's personality quirks and characteristics would eventually go to the character of Reno, which is pretty interesting. To the very left on a staircase, we have a member of Avalanche, but there's no name or face. They're just kind of there to illustrate the fact that Avalanche exists in this universe. And what I really like about this art piece is the environment. It very much is classic Final Fantasy VII, as well as what we see in the remake, where they're able to kind of combine like old school medieval with modern stuff. It's cyberpunk, steampunkish, but you still got those fantasy vibes going on. It's really cool. We even get a second viewpoint from Johnny the Needle on the bridge, looking down at Cloud and the dragons, as well as that Avalanche member. Now, what's really interesting is that Nomura makes a comment on what they had planned to do initially with the game's combat, which I'll read for you guys now. Nomura would go on to say, "Furthermore, unlike previous Final Fantasy titles, this envisioned combat not on fixed battlefields, but whilst moving through the city's three-dimensional environment. Ultimately, this form of combat wasn't realized in the original, but has been achieved in the ongoing 7 Remake series. In that sense, I'd be delighted if you could continue enjoying this grand project, where elements technically unachievable in the original are now being realized in the remake series." That's pretty cool. It also kind of makes me wonder, would Johnny the Needle have been a party member? Because looking at that second image, we do see what looks like crosshairs in the center of that drawing. So maybe Johnny was the gunner of the group. Maybe we could have swapped to him in real time and done some gun damage a la Barrett. But that is going to obviously raise some eyebrows with Nomura saying, yeah, we technically envisioned this combat system back in the day where we had a fully 3D character running around a fully 3D environment where you would fight in that environment in real time instead of being taken to a fixed combat zone. Now, I've seen some of the more cynical takes online from people who are doubting Nomura's words here, but I don't really want to focus on that this year. There's so much negativity in the Final Fantasy fan base. It gets very draining and very tiring. But I'll say my piece here. I don't think Nomura's lying. A, he has no reason to, but B, because there's a little game that exists called Parasite Eve. Why do I bring up Parasite Eve? Well, in one of the really early stages of Final Fantasy VII's story, one of the really early drafts, it focused on a detective who was in New York investigating a series of murders. It may have been on Christmas or Christmas Eve, I don't quite remember, you'll have to clarify for me in the comments, but obviously that never made it into FF7's official story, but elements of that would make their way into Parasite Eve. A game that focuses on New York. It's on Christmas. There's a really weird series of murders that happen at the beginning of the game. So the way my brain is working is, if elements of OG early rough draft Final Fantasy VII story made it into Parasite Eve, then it stands to reason that maybe some of those gameplay ideas they had originally for FF7 also crept their way into Parasite Eve. And we can see that with Parasite Eve's gameplay. You control Aya, she runs around the environment, and when she gets into combat, you're not necessarily taken to a completely new fixed combat zone to do turn-based battle. You're still fighting in the same area. Granted, the backgrounds are not fully 3D because, again, they couldn't figure out that tech and there was a lot of limitations back then, so the environments are completely pre-rendered. But the fact remains the same. Aya is still technically in that same environment. And what's even cooler is you can control her in real time. She can run around the battlefield waiting for her ATB bar to fill up. And once that fills up, then she can start doing things. She can attack, she can use items, she can use defensive stuff. You can even plot your way around the battlefield and potentially avoid enemy attacks, which to me kind of sounds a lot like what Tetsuya Nomura was talking about here and what they initially envisioned for the combat of FF7. So that's just my own personal thinking behind that. And again, the devs have been super open for 5+ years now in so many interviews where they constantly reiterate like, yeah, there was a lot we wanted to do back in the day with the old school FF7, but we had a lot of hardware limitations that just didn't allow us to. And clearly, back then, they wanted you to control your 3D party in a 3D environment and fight then and there in that cityscape. It probably still would have been mostly turn-based for the most part, but the fact that they can now take a lot of those older ideas and implement them into the remake trilogy is super cool. Katase, Toriyama, Nomura, Kazushige Nojima, they've all talked about this in previous interviews of now being able to kind of fully realize what their original vision for Final Fantasy VII was back in the day, nowadays with the remake trilogy. So I think that's a really cool full circle moment for this dev team, and it's got to be pretty satisfying. It's like, hey, we finally have the tech to do a lot of that cool stuff we wanted to do back in the day. So I thought that was just super cool words from Nomura, some really incredible concept art too, which considering how talented of an illustrator that man is, I wouldn't be shocked if he whipped this up in like 30 minutes just to kind of show to the other developers like, hey, this is what we're kind of envisioning, this is what I drew, what do you guys think? But it's also super cool to see just how far Nomura's illustrations have come. The man is incredibly talented. He takes a lot of big swings with his games. They don't always land, but when they do, it's pretty interesting. So I thought this was a pretty cool way to celebrate 29 years of the original Final Fantasy VII with some really cool artwork and now some backstory on it. So I think that's awesome. And now we move on to part 2 of Dirge of Cerberus, the Arising Crisis event in Ever Crisis. Now, when we last saw Vincent, he was doing battle with Azul, who was kind of egging him on a bit, saying, do you even know what your purpose is? Do you even know what you're meant to do, man? Vincent, of course, lays him out and realizes he's kind of right. I need to find some answers. So Vincent heads to Nibelheim, specifically the basement of the Shinra Manor. While there, he sees an orb on the ground, and upon picking up that orb, which might be materia, we see Lucrezia appear. And she's there to warn Vincent of Omega, to which we cut to Lucrezia in her cave talking about what Omega is, his backstory, a being that is born of the planet, but ultimately his goal is to wipe the planet clean, to cleanse it, and take it off into the cosmos. Again, Omega is the last weapon, it's the last defense of the planet. Now it's here that we see that this Lucrezia is just a projection, seemingly a failsafe to help Vincent should he ever go back there one day, and she lets him know, everything that I've studied about Omega is in the Omega report over there on that desk. She then briefly apologizes to Vincent and disappears. Now, Vincent continues to explore the underground of the Shinra Manor, entering the lab, to which he drops to one knee, feeling some severe pain in his chest, which is a really bad time to feel some pain because Rosso, the Crimson, is tailing him. Vincent takes this opportunity to ask her, what is Deepground's plans with Omega? She exclaims that she doesn't know, and honestly, she doesn't care. She's just following orders from Weiss. The Sviets are obsessed with Weiss. He's like their savior, so anything he asks them to do, they don't even question it, they just do it. But there's also a part of her that is really psychopathic. She explains to Vincent that she and these deep ground soldiers, these other Sviets, were born essentially to kill, and she enjoys it. Cleansing the world essentially is what she says. And she even tells Vincent there was a moment in time where she was granted freedom. She could do whatever she wanted. What did she choose to do? Continue to kill, because she ain't right. She tells Vincent that she bathed in the blood of 1,000 soldiers, and she enjoyed it. She's a little bit of a freak, but I think I can fix her. And then she turns to Vincent and she says, "You would understand though, right? You and I, we're one and the same, buddy." To which Vincent disagrees. He pulls out his gat, goes to attack Rosso, but she takes off. So Vincent chases after her, but she's gone. Until she shows up behind him and knocks him out and steals the proto-materia. And because Vincent doesn't have the proto-materia in his chest, he loses control and transforms into his chaos form. And Rosso takes this opportunity to end Vincent until a very large shuriken shows up with a puff of smoke. Yeah, it's Yuffie. She jumps in, she grabs Vincent, and she books it out of there, leaving Rosso incredibly upset. Now it's here that we cut to Cait Sith, or at least one of many Cait Siths, exploring a reactor, to which he sees some funky stuff going on, but unfortunately, he is caught by none other than Nero and seemingly absorbed into Nero's darkness. We then cut to a flashback of young Vincent as a Turk, finding out that Hojo and Lucrezia are about to let experimentations happen on their unborn child. However, Hojo, being the dismissive psychopath that he is, the guy with an ego, he tells Vincent, "We're scientists, dude. We know what we're doing. Now get out of here. You're nothing." At this point in the story, Vincent really cares for Lucrezia, and he asks her, "Is this something you truly want to do?" Lucrezia then gets incredibly upset with Vincent questioning her and says, "This is something that only concerns me, and it's something I want to do." She kind of has a point here. This is a consent thing, her body, her choice, but also being experimented on by a madman like Hojo. One guy you do not want poking and prodding into your stomach or your uterus is Hojo. You don't trust him, he's nasty. And at this point, Vincent regrets not stopping her, and this is one of the things that leads Vincent to feel like he needs to atone, is that he messed up by not doing something, by not trying harder to convince her to not go through with this weird experiment. We then see Lucrezia walking around where she gets a vision of Sephiroth in the fire at the Nibelheim incident, which is obviously foreshadowing a lot of crazy stuff. We also see what I assume is a very quick shot of Vincent essentially waking up after he's been murdered and experimented on and had that proto-materia shoved into his chest. He's looking down, he sees what his hands have become. He's clearly not human anymore, and he freaks out, and I don't blame him. We then cut to another scene of Vincent in Lucrezia's cave where he continues to blame himself, but he hears that voice from Lucrezia saying, "This ain't your fault," and she apologizes once more. Now we cut to Yuffie and Vincent in that truck. Vincent wakes up, recognizes Yuffie, and she's surprised that he's even alive. He had a massive hole in his chest, but she noticed that he heals pretty quick. And she's just happy to see that he's still alive. So Vincent's like, "What are you even doing here?" Yuffie's like, "Well, I was helping out Reeve and his gang, and then I just happened to be in Nibelheim, found you," and she saved his butt, which is pretty cool. Now here they're both interrupted by Reeve, who is sending them a transmission notifying them that some really weird stuff just went down at Mako Reactor 0, but that's not really their concern right now. What they're worried about is letting Vincent and Yuffie know that we're going to have a full-on assault of Midgar to stop Deep Ground once and for all, and they need to be ready. Next, we cut back to the WRO with Shulk in a tube. She exits the tube and has a conversation with her sister Shalua, and this whole segment is essentially Shalua still trying to appeal to her younger sister Shulk, letting her know that she still loves her and she still cares about her and she's not going to give up on her. But of course, Shulk is still not buying it. But we cut to Azul lying in a laboratory. The dude is probably dead. But he awakens, and that's when he transforms into that really large bull monster form, and he starts wrecking shop around the WRO. At this same time, Deep Ground soldiers assault the base, killing tons of the other WRO soldiers and wrecking the building. Now, Vincent arrives at the WRO, but he's alone. Unfortunately, some stuff went down, Yuffie was knocked out, she's being looked after, so he had to attend the WRO on his own, and he comes across Azul in that big monster form. Shallua and Shulk show up, and Azul loses control, and we finally get some combat. Part 1, man, I'm like, are we gonna do any combat? It's all story stuff. It was all just kind of a lot to take in that first part. And finally, they threw a bone, and they're like, here, shut up, Corduroy, you can have a combat session, have some fun. So we do battle with Azul, which is super cool. And after that fight, he continues to go berserk, knocking out Vincent and Shallua and turning on Shulk. She manages to trap him in a barrier that is stronger than his own barrier and armor, and she has a conversation with him because he transforms back into his regular form. And he proceeds to attack her, and she is super shocked, like, hey, we're on the same team here, dude, like, what's going on? And this is when Azul informs her she's no longer needed. Her sole purpose was to find and locate Vincent. That is it. Once she achieved that goal, Vice is like, okay, yeah, terminate her afterwards. We don't need her anymore. Now, before Azul can attack her again, Shulk manages to freeze him in a stronger barrier. She, Vincent, and Shallua then make for the exit because this place is going down. Now, there is a brief moment where Shallua and Shulk are having a conversation, and Shallua just reaffirms to Shulk, like, look, I may have messed up before, but I am not going to leave you now. We've got a lot of lost time that we need to make up for, essentially telling Shulk that you're my sister and I still love you and I'm still going to fight for you. Now, as the base continues to crumble, the last exit door is beginning to close. So Vincent runs and tries to stop it, but it's Shallua who uses her cybernetic robo arm to actually stop the door from closing, allowing Shulk to squeeze through. But it's in this moment that Shallua decides to self-sacrifice. She knows she's not going to make it, and her last act of love is to ensure that her sister, Shulk, can survive. And she says to Vincent, please look after her. And we see Azul making his way to Shallua. The doors close, and we hear some noises, pretty much confirming that Azul has killed Shallua. Shulk is incredibly confused. She doesn't know how to feel. This was someone that she hated for so long because she felt like she was abandoned by her older sister. But in her sister's last act of love, she says, I love you, and then dies. So Vincent grabs Shulk and they leave the WRO base. And that is the end of part 2 of Dirge of Cerberus, the Arising Crisis event in Ever Crisis. And I gotta say, maybe it's because I had a good meal and I'm planning on having some pie after this, but I really enjoyed part 2. Man, part 1, I don't know what it was. It was a slog to get through, and maybe it's because part 1 is a lot of setup. There's a lot you got to get through before the story actually gets going. And again, because this is an abridged version of Dirge, you can kind of take out some of those slower, non-essential story moments and just kind of focus on those really big ones. And I feel that Dirge is at its best when it's focusing on Vincent, Lucrezia, Hojo. Vincent's entire backstory of how he comes to be, I think, is actually super cool and interesting. The fact that he has this proto-materia in his chest, and that's the key to stopping Omega, which is this forgotten weapon that didn't awaken with the other weapons. It's like the last resort of the planet. There's some interesting things there. And even though I wasn't crazy about Shallua and Shulk, they felt kind of shallow, and there wasn't really a lot of time, even in the original Dirge of Cerberus, to like kind of properly set those characters up. I still think that Shallua's self-sacrifice to save her younger sister is pretty sad. I think they do a decent enough job towards the end there of just like reaffirming these are sisters. Shallua really loves her, and her final act is to ensure that she can live on because she feels like she messed up. And there are kind of some parallels there between Shallua and Vincent, where Vincent feels regret of not stepping in more with Lucrezia and trying to convince her not to go through with something that was going to threaten the planet in the future. So those parallels, I think, are pretty cool. And I think the final part, which probably should be next week. Part 3 will probably be shorter, and again, the maybe much easier to get through compared to part 1, because basically all we really have left is some more stuff with Shulk, but it's the big battle, the big assault on Midgar, where we get to see our party again. Cloud, Barret, Tifa, Cid, the High Wind, this really cool action sequence that I think is like one of the best parts of Dirge of Cerberus on PS2. When I saw that as a kid, I'm like, oh my god, this is what I've always wanted. Like, I think it was the first time that we saw those characters rendered on the PlayStation 2 with new graphics and with voices, and to see them all come back, even though the writing's not great, was still a really cool moment. It's a really great cutscene in Dirge where the party's back, they're working with the WRO soldiers and Reeve, and they're just headed towards Midgar. Cloud gets ambushed by Rosso and they have this cool fight. There's some sick stuff there. Unfortunately, not all of Dirge is great, but there, again, are some moments that are genuinely pretty interesting in my opinion. And then, part 3 will close out also with more of Vincent's backstory. The gist of what I remember is Vincent has really grown fond of Lucrezia. He knows that Lucrezia and Hojo are a bit of a thing. Why Lucrezia got into bed with Hojo is beyond me, but he sees that something is wrong with her, and he's like, this has got to be the work of Hojo. So he confronts Hojo, and he's like, are you hurting Lucrezia? And Hojo's like, bitch, I might be. And then he pulls out the gun and he kills Vincent. So his backstory is told in bits and pieces, but there are some things there again that I think are pretty well done. But part 3 should be hitting next week. So that will be the big finale event. With that being said, I am Curious Corduroy. That is the video. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought about what we discussed in today's video, whether it being the announcement that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is officially coming to the Switch 2 with a release date and a trailer, or Nomura's artwork showcasing some really early concept ideas for OG FF7, or maybe you got some thoughts on Dirge of Cerberus Part 2 in Ever Crisis. Let me know in the comments down below. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.